Welcome back to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm still here with Peter Scalzo. And yes, we are wearing the same clothes today because we're recording 2 episodes in a row.
No, because I have a small wardrobe.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah,
I think Jack was,
wardrobe.
he was
Jack
looking
just-
back. He was like, dude, you've been wearing the same shirt over. It's like, well, I only have like 2. It's like,
Yeah, Jack knows the true story.
that's hilarious. Well, if you're joining us, I hope you've maybe heard a few of the last episodes because we've been walking through Peter's dark night of the soul and his cancer journey. It was 2015 where he was given a virtual death sentence. And in that moment, it was really dark. And we've taken time because early on in his journey, he felt that hopelessness. And then he started the journey, what we call the journey through the wall, where he took one step at a time as he faced that sentence with all that was in front of you. And you started documenting it from a journal that Johnny D put on your chest. And so we've been walking through the journal, and because it has a bit of that documentation of how you were able to take those steps. And I said at the end of last episode, and we kind of just want to reiterate that this isn't the prescription for going through the wall. This is Peter's journey through the wall and some of the components you might find helpful. If you've been diagnosed with cancer, and I think the reason why it's so scary is because, the C word brings about a fear of death and pain and suffering that comes with it. And so it's a wall. And it may not be like, I think this is probably your darkest night of the soul that you're describing here. So it may not be your darkest night, but it's a wall, and you're going to have to journey through.
I mean, I think I would describe this whole thing as my foundation was ripped out.
Yeah.
Everything I thought about, everything was torn away. And so I'm in the process right now of having that foundation rebuilt. And I can honestly say I totally relate to the powerlessness that we talk about in recovery, and that really my higher power was putting some pieces together here, rescuing me. And so he gets the glory for this. I was in a position of not having any answers at all. But I think it's so helpful to talk about those aspects of my journey that really kind of brought me a glimmer of hope and all that. And I think I just wanted to say that the hallmarks for negative emotions were fear, anger, and sadness, and mostly fear and sadness. And even now, I still bounce around those 3 things at times. I got a lot going on right now with my kidneys and can't do cancer treatment, all that kind of stuff. But my foundation, in the wall I'm in right now with kidney function, and we were talking about that, the foundation's still there. It hasn't been torn out. And this darkest night of the soul, everything was torn away. It was as if the structure burned down and then bulldozers came and took away the foundation as if a house hadn't been there. So it's kind of like, what does it look like to construct the house back up? And I think we talked about being honest about what's going on, our own emotions, and how it's biblical to do that, all that. And then you were pointing out, really, I hadn't thought about it that much, but that glimmer of hope that came through having my children there. The loneliness that I was dealing with, but then the glimmer of hope that came through that. And starting and building that foundation again. And then, so wherever you want to go right now.
Yeah. And I like that analogy that you're using right now, the foundation being torn out, and I'll call it repoured. If you have a concrete foundation, it'd be repoured. And before you get to it being torn out, I would say the thing I would recognize in listening to what you shared is that you didn't know your foundation needed to be rebuilt, that it was cracked and faulty until you got to how poor it was, how broken that foundation was. And so to have it rebuilt wasn't important. Like as you look back now, one of your quotes that you share as you were going into one of your early surgeries is that I'm going to remove the cancer,
Right.
and not just the physical cancer, but the spiritual cancer. And that was a foundation kind of concept, I think, still there is that you didn't recognize. You're like, what does that mean? And then you went under, I think is the way you've described it, which I had this kind of picture in my head what it was like. And so I do think this is such a great point that you're making about the part about drilling to the wall is a reconstructing foundations.
Yeah.
I
mean, even in the divorce space for me, which brought me into recovery, and I finally did an inventory of my life, that was another foundation that had been torn away. I faced my shadow, really, for the first time in my life at 52 years of age. So who am I really? And, man, that foundation was built on those truths, that honesty, realness, and vulnerability. And then now I was in a situation, I don't know, a year later or so, facing this other foundation which had been ripped away. So yeah, being poured again is a good way to put it.
So we're going to start in a little bit more on the next page in your journal and just see what is revealed on your journey as we continue going on here.
Yeah, I think so. What I get into as I wrote this looks like 7 days after the surgery is recognizing some facts. I label them as fact one.
And this is the third day of journal writing, right? So you wrote, so this is your third day where you start.
Third day of journal writing.
So this is on day 3 of actually writing 7 days after the surgery.
Yep.
Okay.
Fact one, my physical body has been crushed and invaded. Fact two, there is nothing I can do about it. I'm currently in a long hospital stay and rehab situation. I put fact three, I can't afford this. Both money and time off from my job. I started to look at kind of the financial resources. I put down my life feels over.
Okay.
And then fact four, I turned to God.
Interesting that I wanted to explore this. That it's funny that this is at day 3 that you started out. It's not an expression in the same manner as the other ones, and you started with facts. What prompted you to go to facts?
It just helped me organize this process of repouring the foundation.
Now, hold on. If you don't know, if you haven't listened to that much, Peter was an attorney by your profession.
Yeah.
And so it's almost I'm sitting here just thinking about this, like, so your attorney trainings, I have to put down the facts. And so let me get the facts of the case, sir. And here you are. I'm going to cross-examine these facts here in a second. So just be aware.
I labeled these as my truth, like truths.
Okay. Well, there was something that's interesting in those, is that you made certain things feelings facts, and so that's one of the things I want to explore in my cross-examination here. Counselor.
Isn't it true that
but I am, so there's something about your personality that shows up here, is that you started out with facts, but it does fit into our last episode of, hey, what's true, and getting to truths too, because you needed to start walking in truth. And so do you think the biggest motivation is that you felt a need, once you got to a point of truth, I want to actually get to all the truths?
The issue here is I'm in a boat and it's adrift and there's a storm.
Yeah.
And I need an anchor. And I don't know of any other anchor but from where I've been before with God, because he's always been an anchor for me.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to rediscover this anchor again in the context of what's going on here, because I'm adrift and I'm being tossed to and fro. And it didn't feel good. That being tossed to and fro, I felt conflicted. I felt darkness. I didn't feel stability. And it was not a good feeling at all.
So day 3, you recognize that you're a ship in the middle of a storm in the ocean and you're being tossed everywhere.
So
Give me fact 1 again.
It helped me to say, okay, my physical body has been crushed and invaded.
Yeah.
I mean, I look down, really, it's huge incision, tubes everywhere.
That feels undeniable, a fact that that's happened. Yeah.
There is nothing I can do about it.
That seems undeniable also to me right now.
I am currently in a long hospital stay and rehab situation.
That's fact 3.
That's the part of 2.
That's part of 2. Yes, that seems
3 is
right.
I can't afford this.
Now that I want to pause.
Both money and time.
Why did you go there?
I think I've always had anxiety wrapped up. I was talking about this yesterday with my girlfriend. Actually, it was. I've always I know is a hard word to say, but felt anxious around providing for my. I have 6 kids, so
I'm going to stop you for a second, because that's exactly what because you said the word anxious, and what I heard is fact 1, and that's undeniable. Fact 2, undeniable. Fear 3. Oh, wait a second. Fear 1. It's that you put into fact 3 your fear.
Right.
And I just want to explore for a second because I've read this before, and it just, as you read it, it struck me. It's like, but that's not a fact. That's a fear.
Yeah.
Why did you put fear in the middle of your facts?
That's a good question. Thank you.
This is my cross-examination. You must answer the court.
It felt so factual to me. So
it felt factual.
Yeah,
yes.
So truthful, to say it. Like this, that is my reality. That's what it felt like.
Yes, tell me where the feeling. So you went, because you said anxious. That's why I wanted, because anxiousness and fear, a lot of, hand in handness there. So describe the feeling and why that particular fact or feeling, not fact, that feeling and fear came into your facts.
I think all my family of origin and growing up, and there was always this concept that the money's going to run out at any time. And
can I laugh out loud?
Yeah. I know, because my situation, but and that was sort of drummed into me as a small business owner and all that. And I pursued law because I was interested in it, but also because it would be a good way for me to provide for my family. And it's an irrational thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a fact at all.
Right. But in that state that I was in, it was like, okay, this feels like a reality.
It felt like as big as the other 2. Read number 4 now.
Well, this is where I say something about God.
I know.
I put God is love. I put down He has saved me so many times. I have a special relationship with Him. This was a fact. God is my best interest at heart. Has my best interest at heart. He has been tender and gentle.
Was that a fact?
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile that with day 1 of the journal?
That's the thing about journals. They aren't graded. It doesn't get an A, B, C, D, or F.
Oh, my goodness. I feel like I'm talking to an attorney now.
And
but how did you reconcile that? You
didn't.
That on...
I just wrote it.
I'm asking you now, though.
Yeah. Well, now
because the reason why it's funny to me, and it's not funny in a laughing at your pain, but it's you start out very, here's my facts. Then you go to a fear, and then you contradict yourself from something just 2 days earlier.
Yeah.
And your circumstances hadn't changed.
Right.
And so there's a recognition of something happening inside of this journal that represents the turmoil that's inside of you. And so I don't actually want to try to force you into being consistent as much as a recognition of your feelings are going all over the place here in this dark night of the soul. Yours, like that description you had of the sea is what you're writing about, seems to me to be showing you you're at the wave up here and then down here, up here and down here.
But it was helpful to chronicle it and then read it back and then be like, oh, wow, I said this at this point, and I said this at this point. I'm not critical of myself. I just recognize that I am in turmoil. That's a good way to put it.
Did you think that point 3 was a fact up until today?
No. Up until you mean reading it in my journal here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that weird, right?
Yeah.
Is that like an aha moment? Why did I do that?
Yeah. Because and
it's not brilliant. It's like you're reading your journal to somebody else right now, which is really vulnerable. And so to do that and to have somebody, what strikes them?
Yeah.
It's not, oh, you're so smart, you saw something. It's like, no, I'm just listening to it like everybody else. And it's like, huh, isn't that weird that that you saw that as a fact, the same as the others?
Because, and the glaring example for me, which contradicts what I put down here, is in 2017 when cancer is throughout and they say, okay, go home and call hospice and quit work. It just worked out. God worked it out where my firm helped me in the interim until long-term disability kicked in. And then long-term disability plus my mom had me purchase another disability policy years before. She just said, I think you should do this.
Wait a second. Can you say her voice again? I don't actually
I
hear
think
her.
you should do this. Peter, who I love so much.
But anyway, whenever you change to your parents' voices, that always triggers me to actually, hey, that's hilarious. And I actually want to know, I wonder what causes that particular tonnage. Yeah.
But, and so I just, quote, happened to buy this other disability policy. So, for now 7 years, I've been provided for well through disability policies. Now, when I read this, I'm like, well, I can't afford this, but no, I can. God has provided. Yeah.
Really fascinating. I don't want to overharp on that because but I think there's something going on inside of you each day. And I think it highlights something about the dark night of the soul is to recognize inside of our own emotional state, there's going to be deep ups and downs, because I think that's what I hear. And when you wrote that, you felt, where in the wave are you when you write that?
Yeah, still in the darkness, still there, but starting to see some glimmers of light.
And is that why you're able to write Fact 4?
I think so, yeah.
Because you saw a glimmer of light.
It's interesting because in Fact 4, I'm not like screaming out to God to be healed kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I focused on his love and what became paramount, there's a couple verses in Romans that say, they basically describe how nothing can separate me from God's love, neither life nor death, neither cancer nor, whatever. And I took great comfort in that. That was a comforting truth. So is there anything else on day 3 that you wrote? Well, 10:09. No, that was it. That was the end of day 3. Yep. So you ended day 3 similar to day 2. There's a glimmer of light. Yep. So, and I reminded myself that I have a special relationship with him. Yeah. So you highlight day 2 relationship of a gift of these of your family, right? And you and I talked about that as having warmth. And now, when you think and feel about God on day 3, what do you feel there? I would say reassurance, comfort, and the issue for me is it's sort of kind of like starting in the intellect and then sort of resonating deeper in my core, like my soul, spirit. And I don't think it was there yet. I was kind of like saying, hey, I know this to be true intellectually, but when will my core say, yes, that's true? You know, and I think I was in a process of, that's why at one
you were
point
starting
I
to
say,
feel some of it in the core at that point.
yeah, and I think at one point I say, I've read these scriptures my whole life, but now I really have read these scriptures. Now I know what they mean because of an experience of having these scriptures were used by the Holy Spirit to feed me and heal me at the deepest places in my life. That's the only way I can describe it.
And you're struggling to describe it because you're connecting your feelings to your soul.
Right.
Is that a good words to put around that?
Sure.
Is that your feelings do somehow connect to your soul of who you are? Mm-hmm. The deepest part. That's what you're trying to describe. But it's almost impossible to put words around some of these, this level of intensity that you're at.
And there's choices. I know I have choices to make. There are choices that I'm making.
Tell me.
Where do I want to plant 2 feet? Do I want to stay in the abyss, in the sea that's tossing my ship to and fro, and focus on, continue to focus on the fear and the sadness, or do I want a lifeboat?
When did you become aware of that choice?
Oh, well, a week and a half, whatever.
Was it on this day? I mean, so this day.
Yeah, I started.
In this day, you became aware of the
later,
choice.
I started to be like, hey, Peter, you do have a choice here.
Okay, now that's fascinating. So the first two, like day one, you're expressing deep disappointment, and you get out into honesty that, hey, you're angry, disappointed, sadness, fear.
No guests, no platitudes, nothing.
Yes, day two, you get to a point of expression that allows you to be honest, and then you see a glimmer of hope, and you feel the warmth of your family. Day three, you start these facts, but you're somewhere in day three, you're presented with internally, I actually do have to choose in or choose out. I have to make a choice to which way I'm going to go with this.
Yeah, in other words, I'm powerless. I recognize I'm powerless over my health situation, but I do have choices, even though.
Yes, so that's actually really fascinating because it's choices related to the wall. Right. Will I face the wall and step into it? It's not about power. I love the way it's like you could not control your medical journey.
Right.
You couldn't even control your financial journey. And maybe that's the one sense that's like there's a kind of a partial truth in that fact. 3 is that your financial journey is now out of your control. Whatever happens there is just going to happen in a sense.
Right.
But you still had some level of decision making that you needed to step into.
I'll say this because I've said it publicly in sermons, and how I described it was this. And it's like that room of blackness and darkness became a room of light. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, even though my diagnosis and prognosis did not change.
But was that on day 3?
No.
Okay.
I'm just saying that's coming.
That's coming, yeah.
But I'm just saying.
You always want to get to the good part. Right?
Well, I think I just want to mention, even though my situation didn't change medically at all.
Never did, right.
That room of blackness and darkness became a room of light.
While you were in the hospital, it never did, right?
Yeah.
So during this time of writing the journal, your circumstances haven't changed.
And I know we're not there yet.
That's right.
But at some point, I'm going to do a gratitude list.
Yeah.
And there's game changers along the way.
You love to jump ahead, don't you?
I'm sorry. There are game changers along the way. And so we can discuss that.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why we want to go through is just to talk about how those affected. This piece here, though, it may feel really small, but that comment that you made there is that you got to a point where you recognized that you had to make a choice. And I know I've quoted this many times, but I'm going to I'm going to quote him again because I just think Blackaby's concept here is so big, is that God always brings you to experience him. He brings you to a crisis of belief that requires faith and action. And that action point is your choice. What action? And it wasn't a physical action. It was an internal surrender that you're talking about. That was the choice, I think, because your physical action, you could not change your physicality in any real way about what was happening with your physical being. But there was a choice that was given you that was not that you could change the emotions you felt, but how would you describe the real choice that was in front of you?
I think there was always a reservation on my part to totally give myself to God because of I like to have a feeling of being in control. And I think at this point, I was in a situation which I knew it was a fact. I have no control over this. And so giving myself to God, I had nothing to offer him. It's like I wasn't giving him my performance, all those things that, I took another Bible course, I give this to you. Nothing. I had nothing to offer him other than my essence, who I am.
Yes. So if I redefine your list,
Yeah.
it wasn't so much that they were all facts.
Yeah.
You described your devastation. Like all of those are, hey, you were physically devastated, emotionally crushed and powerless, financially hurt, crippled in big ways. And then your point 4 is your choice. It's you taking that choice you're talking about. It's like a but God.
Yeah, and spiritually crushed too. Like,
yes,
how could this happen? How could you let this happen?
Yeah.
And yes, like we talked about, well, Peter, did you walk away from God? No, I didn't walk away.
No, you got honest with him.
I was disappointed and angry,
Yeah.
upset. How could this be happening? But I didn't walk away. And then, yes, adrift in that sea, it was, well, let me go back to an anchor that I know to be true. And that anchor was Jesus.
For this episode, I don't want to get away from this choice, and we're in this day. And I just think you've defined a bit how conscious was that choice. And I think it has to have a level of like the difficulty of choosing into, like if I think about you descriptions of day 1 and 2, you at day 1, you said, I don't want to go forward. You said, take me now. That was your words. And so isn't there something inside of you that is the wrestle that's happening here? It feels like from the expressions that I hear, and I don't want to, I'm just going to put it out there and see you redefine it, but it's, am I willing to go forward in whatever God has called me into or not?
I think I don't even know if I was there yet, but it was I remember crying and just saying, you're all I have.
This is day 3.
Yeah.
You felt emotion. Describe in detail that emotion. Where like when do you
sadness,
you're laying
despair.
in bed and you start crying? Like I'd like to understand
I'm in
that.
this abyss, wallowing in the disappointment, and the despair, and then getting to a point of crying over the loss, the utter loss, and then saying, but God, you're all I have. Like, I don't have anywhere else to turn.
You've hemmed me in. This kind
If
of
you
a passage.
Don't come, I have no other higher power here to turn to. No one else. I mean, yes, my kids were comforting me and people, but as far as being an anchor for my soul and my spirit, my mind, all that, I said, God, you're the only one.
So did you really have a choice then, or was it just you only had one? There was only one option.
I was like, I can either run from you, I can reject you right now, or I can embrace you, even though it makes no sense, and I'm going to embrace you.
Okay,
and
so
see
there was a choice.
What's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn. I'm going
run,
to turn
reject,
to
or embrace.
Yeah.
That's how you describe their choice. I
Yep.
think that's a great way of.
Yeah.
And I think when we're going through a dark night of the soul, I think if we're honest, those are the choices. So much of what you described is there's devastation, and most times the devastation is out of our control, the ability to really impact it in any real way.
Yeah.
And so the choice that you're describing, and I see and hear in this journal, is here's a devastation, and now am I going to embrace whatever God's doing in the devastation, or am I going to run and reject?
I mean, I crack up at Jonah's story in Scripture because he doesn't want to go to the people of Nineveh because they're enemies of Israel and pagans. He's like angry. So he goes the opposite way. He runs.
He runs.
And then finds himself in the belly of a great fish. And those 3 days in that belly, he goes through a big wall.
And he has to make a choice.
He has to make choice in there. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I think this is an important component. So as we think about components of walking through the wall, I love what we've got to today because it doesn't seem obvious at first, but when you said in this episode, I had a choice, it's actually not written in the paper here, but you recognized it when you read through it here a little bit.
Oh, I knew when I was living this.
Yeah.
I have choices.
You have choices.
Yeah.
And man, if that's not important, like we have a will. And that's why like willingness means, what am I going to do with my will? And it may not feel like much of a choice, but it's probably the biggest choice you could have made. It's like, how are you going to apply your will? Is it embracing God or is it running in rejection? And that was the choice that you were up against. And what I hear in your fact 4 is the conclusion of your heart is, this is what I'm choosing. It's an expression of choice a little bit. Read it again. Fact 4.
Oh, God is love. He has saved me He has saved me so many times. I have a special relationship with him. God has my best interests at heart. He has been tender and gentle.
How does that sit with you now?
Well, it's true.
Feelings-wise, how does it sit with you?
I think I put it down because I wanted to believe that. I think I put it down because there was something inside of me saying this is true, even though my circumstances around me didn't show it. Like I remember writing tender and gentle. Why are you even writing that? This is violent out what your body's going through.
Isn't it interesting that you put fact?
Yeah.
And then you and so I'm going to put
you can't change my journal.
Fear, but this wasn't fact yet so much, even though it was hope.
Right.
And so you had fear juxtaposed with hope, and you ended with hope.
Yeah, and even, I know, don't spoil. That's such a big spoiler alert, but I even get to the point where I give my brokenness and devastation back to God.
Yeah.
I surrender it back to him. I give this back to you.
Yeah.
And then we really become enmeshed in this journey together.
And that's going to be something we're going to cover in a future episode because we're going through your documented journey through the wall. And I hope people can appreciate the difficulty of, and you're allowing us into some of the most intimate parts of your journey, and you're willing to just dive in. And so that's not an easy thing to do.
No. And just as a reminder, 2005 at Sloan Kettering, I had this overwhelming sense and really question that I believe was from God. And it was, or directive, I want you to be transparent about this journey. I mean, that was like overwhelming. And I'm like, I don't want to be transparent about this. This is terrible.
Yeah.
But I have reaped incredible fruit by being transparent about my journey.
Yeah. But reading your journal on a podcast and then having somebody ask you questions on it and dig, that's a level of vulnerability that I'm going to say thank you again for sharing that with us. I know it's not easy to do, but I do find that what you've done in this journal has showed us a lot of components to the journey through the wall. And so hopefully today's component, the one that seems to jump out at me it's not about facts, but the choice.
Yeah.
You had different things that were in front of you, and some of them were facts, some of them were fears, some of them were hopes, but all of it culminated with a choice. What are you going to do with your will? And a part of the journey through the wall is to examine your will and up against hopes, fears, facts. And in your story, the big step that I think helped you out was that you embraced that glimmer of light, that glimmer of hope and light that was out there. And that is such an important part of the journey through the wall, is like submitting your will, becoming willing. And we talk about in recovering, I turn my life and will over to Christ's care and control. And so in your journal, in your Dark Night of the Soul, you're describing how that looks. It's such an easy, it's not just a word, I turn my life and will. You're describing the process of turning your will over to Christ's care and control. And it's not a simple little snap of the fingers thing. It is a wrestle, because you're in the seas. Like one day you're like, I can't do this anymore. The next day there's a little bit of warmth, but it's dark. And the next day it's fear and devastation. And yet, but there's something there, and you grasp hold of that with your will. And that's what it looks like to work into that one big thing that I think is in probably every journey through the wall. What's that one choice that you need to make? Right. And you describe it well in your journal this week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And
Blessings.
We're going to keep going for a little bit more in this journey with Peter. And check out cancerandpeace.com. And we thank you for just checking it out.
Blessings.